Hello, hello. We are live once again. It's another Women Talking Wellness. So, a warm welcome to you if you are watching us live tonight. And if you are watching us live and this is not your first Women Talking Wellness rodeo, then you know that I want to hear from you in the comments. So, send us some love, give us a thumbs up, tell me that you're watching, give us a shout out from wherever you are tonight. If you're watching this on the replay, do remember to stick a replay in the comments and share one of your big takeaways from tonight's conversation. So, welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening. I'm just back from an amazing few days of R&R in the Scottish Highlands, and I am totally ready to hit the ground running. And I'm going to do that with an opportunity to chat to a woman who truly knows how to talk about wellness. So she's in the right place. Hormones everywhere, but do we really understand them? What do they do? And how the heck do we make friends with them? Well, my guest tonight knows her way around this topic with her eyes closed. She's learned through her own past, sometimes painful experiences. She's grown into one of the leading experts in the country in healthy living. Now, your hormones are the key to living a truly healthy life. And a great place to begin is to have a deeper understanding of just how powerful and far reaching the effects of your hormones actually are. So, I am super happy to introduce a mentor, a guide, and I'm very proud to say a friend of mine, Claire Snowdon-Darling. Welcome to Women Talking Wellness.
Hello, Lorna. It's so good to be here and to see you.
I am so happy you're here, and I'm actually so I've been looking forward to this talk since we had discussed it a couple of weeks ago. To share about hormones, because I don't know about you guys that are watching tonight, but I think many of us kind of think that hormones are about periods and menopause, and the bit in between kind of gets forgotten. We don't realize just how
Mhm.
extensive these little chemicals are within our body. So we're going to be diving into this over the course of our talk tonight. But to begin, I think it's really, really pertinent, and it's actually a very powerful story. I'd love for you to share with our viewers and listeners today. How did you get to this point? How did you get to be such an expert in the world of hormones?
You are right. I learned the hard way.
But it makes for a good story, right?
It really does make for a good story. Yeah, so basically, my story in wellness starts in 2004 when I went into labor with my daughter after a perfectly fabulous pregnancy and absolutely no problem with fertility. So, nothing to be unexpected during my labor, apart from the fact that it all went horribly, horribly wrong. And it was an incredibly traumatic labor for us both, I have to say. And it left, we both nearly died during that labor. And I lost a huge amount of blood, which they didn't tell me during my emergency C section. And I actually woke up in recovery exhausted, and I never stopped feeling exhausted. So I couldn't, I just couldn't stay awake. I mean, literally couldn't stay awake. And this wasn't just, I'm a bit tired after childbirth. You see those beautiful pictures of mums holding their babies. I couldn't even hold her. I couldn't hold her for days. I was just utterly exhausted. After that, I started to realize that I didn't, I just couldn't be around her by myself. There was something missing where it just wasn't okay for me to be next to her. I just had a sense that something wasn't quite right. But it actually took 10 months for me to be diagnosed with postnatal depression. So I discovered by that point that I'd actually gone through postpartum psychosis, which was the not wanting to be with her by myself. And it's quite common in postpartum psychosis that your baby's crying, you put their head under a pillow because it's just an obvious thing to do. And I've really gone through this, I mean, massive panic attacks when I was left by myself with her, and just actually putting her safe in her cot and just sitting outside on the front step because I knew I couldn't be near her. So the whole kind of first year was very traumatizing. And when I got diagnosed with the depression, they told me to take a few months off work, which was utterly hilarious because I was running my own businesses at the time. But finally, the wave of depression actually knocked me down, and I was still going through this fatigue. So for many years, I had this horrendous fatigue where I was dragging myself off to work, coming back about 3, having picked her up. My ex-husband would meet me at home sort of for 5. I would go straight to bed because I couldn't stand up any longer and sleep whilst he would do all of the shenanigans and then wake me up to eat, and then I'd go back to bed. And that was just my life for a few years. And then by the time, so we had no bond, my daughter and I did everything I needed to do. I studied enough child psychology. I would tickle her and play with her and kiss her and talk to her, but it wasn't from a connected place at all. And in 2000, when she was 8, so 2010, I realized that, having had quite a lot of counseling by this point and having been on a journey to get well, I'd actually started my training in 2007, because by getting myself a bit better, by trying to get into nutrition, I thought this would actually help me. But I then found out in 2010 that I had post-traumatic stress disorder. So then started the big journey, not only in the physical aspect, but also the emotional aspect, because I realized that my daughter deserved a mum who loved her, and I deserved the experience of loving my child. So the physical journey and the emotional journey went hand in hand. What was missing from my physical journey? So I started training as a kinesiologist. I trained with what I consider to be, the best schools. Very quickly, my career took off. I was clearly put on the earth to do this work, and I had my clinic, and I was building a very successful practice and teaching up in London. And I was having all the kinesiology and taking all the supplements and doing everything right, but I just wasn't getting better. And I was really frustrated by this, because I was like, this is fixing all the people that I'm working with. What's going on? And it wasn't until I was 39, literally 3 months before my 40th birthday. So that was 4 years ago now. So we're talking, sort of 12 years into the process of being a parent. So dealing with chronic fatigue, building businesses. I'd got over the depression, thankfully. And I did actually create a beautiful relationship with my daughter, but still couldn't deal with this fatigue. And there were other things. I think back when you and I had sort of become friends around 2015, I was putting on weight daily. My fatigue was back to the point that just dragging myself around. I had the most awful mood swings. My periods were weird. And I was like, what is going on with me? But every time I went to the doctor, they kept telling me that I was fine. So I had to really push the agenda. And finally, and actually go private, which, fine, but not accessible to everybody. And finally got an endocrinologist to take me seriously, because by this point I'd had gynecologists wanting to just take my womb out. And I was like, I don't have a problem with my periods. I have a problem with the fact that my periods are irregular. There's not a problem with the actual bleed. I'd had doctors telling me that adrenal fatigue didn't exist. I'd been, gone through the ringer. And finally I got diagnosed with something called premature ovarian failure, which is basically premature menopause just before my 40th birthday. And once I had that as a diagnosis,
sorry, happy birthday.
Yay, that's so sexy. It was when the night sweats started. I was actually away celebrating my 40th in Italy, and I googled night sweats, and it comes up straight away with lymphoma. Like, that was not a fun few days before I actually got the results of my blood test. I was like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it was premature menopause, which is better than lymphoma, but actually it's a really crap diagnosis, because the problem is that as soon as you're given a diagnosis of something like menopause, it's like, well, that's it, you're done now. You can't get any, it's never covered by insurance. Your only option medically is HRT, which is only suitable for a very small number of women, and certainly not for women who are going into early menopause because of a massive trauma, which is something I'm going to talk about, a bit later. So I then had to go on this huge journey myself to try and find how I could, figure this out. So that ended up in going down the road of bioidentical hormones. But going on that journey, I realized that, we talk about wellness and holistic therapies. But if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not that holistic, because if somebody comes in with a bad knee, guess what we're going to try and do? We might say, oh, the knee's coming from this shoulder twisting over here, which is actually coming from your pelvis. So, yeah, we might, even in yoga terms, we might do pelvis work, but we're still looking to fix the knee problem. And through this whole journey, I realized we got to stop trying to fix the knee problem. The body will do that. We have to be so courageous to focus on where the root cause actually is. And that led to a huge amount of research. I had to, overhaul my whole life and look at what really was causing the worst of these symptoms. And that led to some incredible research, which we call the triangle of hormonal health, which I'm going to be talking to you about later. And the bit that excites me so much about this triangle is because you're right. When we hear the word hormones, we're thinking estrogen. For those of us who know a bit more, we might think progesterone. Men are thinking testosterone. We're not thinking about the hundreds of hormones in our body that literally make every single decision for us.
Yeah.
They drive every single decision we make, everything. So we don't think that, and we need to understand that.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, tonight's Women Talking Wellness topic is a really juicy one, and if you've missed the last sort of 10-15 minutes talking to Claire, then you really do want to watch this on the replay because it's so interesting. We're talking hormones. Claire Snowdon-Darling, the founder of Balanced Wellness and the head of the College of Functional Kinesiology, is here to talk about just how our hormones affect us on every level. Now, if you've got a question for Claire, hit me up in the comments. She's going to answer them live this evening. If you're watching on the replay, then just type replay into the comments. And of course, let us know what your biggest takeaway is from tonight's talk. So Claire is telling us all about her journey and how she kind of taught herself about hormones and the effects that they have. And I find this is a kind of repeated pattern that I've been seeing since I've started doing these talks, that so many women in particular, and I know this is not exclusive to women, but so many women in particular have suffered with conditions and either been misdiagnosed or told that it's all in their head.
Yeah.
You're just making it up, you just need to lie down a bit, or you just need to have a holiday or whatever. And in so many ways it's a wonderful thing because it spurred you on to take steps and find out these things for yourself. But realistically, we shouldn't have to do that.
No,
So
it's really not our job. It's not our job to have to do that. And I kind of want to say something about that. I'd like to speak to that because firstly, all of our research comes out of the functional nutrition world. Nutritional science 5 years ago was a misnomer. There wasn't really any. Functional nutrition is the fastest growing science on the planet. So it's so new. This information is so new that we now, nutritionists, kinesiologists, are at the front line of kind of proper health coaching. That's how I see us. It's becoming so valuable. The difficulty is the medical model doesn't work that way. So some of the ways that, some of the issues that I had, so talking about some of the issues with, for example, HRT, when I was going in and talking to the doctors and saying, look, I want this thing, this actual natural thing that you have access to, because of this medical model, this scientific thing, they'd literally look at me and go, well, yeah, that science exists, but that's not how we work. So it's not that the science is flawed, it's that under their regulations, their hands are tied. And that's not how they've been trained. So we are now getting to a point with the holistic therapy world that there is this kind of chasm where now we're able to actually say, this is what we can do that the doctors can't. And this is why. It's because of their regulations. It's a different approach, and that's okay. And if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I want to be in hospital on all the drugs. So this is not about bashing the medical model. It's about actually saying that there are things that they are now not really able to help with because we have got more science than the one size fits all approach that they work with, especially when they're so tied by economy. That's really the issue. So I want to just start off with telling you what this really fundamental research was. And it came about through a conversation with a friend of mine. My whole world fell apart in 2015, and I had to go on a little sabbatical to Australia. And I was going, right, that's it, I'm going to change career. I can't do this health stuff anymore. It's broke. I've burnt out. I'm broken. And I was sat talking to my friend in Byron Bay, actually, and she was going through something awful. And I was trying to explain to her how her eating junk food was causing her bad periods. And I just drew a triangle in my journal and I just scribbled something out. And it was like the first time where I sat there and went, oh. And I came home and I told my glorious business partner, the wonderful Laura Knowles, and she did what Laura always does, which is to go, ooh, that's interesting. Let me go and do all the research and backfill this marvelous model that you've created. So we have created, and it's the foundation of all of our practitioner training now, and it's how we work with all of our clients. We work with the triangle of hormonal health is I'm here. I'm with my triangle. It is literally an interplay between three sets of hormones. This is the first bit that I really want you to understand. There is an interplay between three sets of hormones. That's what we're going to be covering this evening. These three sets of hormones are, from reading them from left to right, are blood sugar hormones. And I'm going to talk to you more about those in a moment. Our stress hormones, I'm going to talk to you more about those in a moment. And then on the other side of the triangle, our sex hormones. Because you're right, this does affect men too, but men also have estrogen and women also have testosterone. So it's an interplay between blood sugar hormones, stress hormones, and sex hormones. And it's like, I want you to imagine a stool, and we need the legs of the stool to all be even. We need those hormone structures to be balanced. What happens is, if something like early menopause, well, already one of the legs is out of balance, or something like PCOS, endometriosis, heavy periods, one of those legs is out of balance. That puts more pressure on the other two sides. So we need to take extra care. But then if one of the other sides is off and then the other side is off, we've got a stool that is like, going to fall over. That is actually the state of play now. What's really interesting is that a lot of people come to us because of digestive issues, plagues, particularly women. The other reason that people are coming to see us now is this huge influx of autoimmune diseases, this huge increase in cancers, these huge immune issues. Immune and digestion are victims of this stool, this triangle being out of balance. And when we start to understand that they're just victims, all of a sudden we don't have to work on those because the body is smart and it will fix those when we fix these hormone structures. So just trying to do a microbiome reset, just trying to do a liver flush, just doing a big colon cleanse isn't going to fix the underlying hormone imbalance.
I am sure there's a lot of people watching and listening right now that can relate to that so much. And I don't know, like, guys, stick something in the comments. Give me a little thumbs up. Give me a smiley face if that just made sense of so much conflicting and confusing information that you've probably been told over the years. Because now I have this picture in my head of three legs on a stool. I genuinely feel I'm sitting here right now going, oh.
Because isn't it normal? Like, you have a really bad period, so what do you want to do? You want to, veg on the sofa and eat rubbish, or we're so busy and stressed at work, so we're grabbing and going. But these are the times where it's like, no, now I feed myself properly. Now I put the scaffolding on,
Yeah, it's
and
even
actually,
more important.
That work might be really important, but actually, so is mindfulness. I need to shut down that computer at whatever time, and I need to go and be still and be with my family or go on a bike ride, whatever it is.
Come do yoga.
Come to yoga.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
Rachel's just said, I'm a one-legged stool. Is that not a walking seat if you're a one-legged stool?
Yeah, a little bit. So let's just start going through what the issues are.
Do
Okay, so
it.
I'm going to just run through. So the current problems we're seeing with stress hormones. Now, stress hormones predominantly made by the adrenal glands. So when I talk about stress hormones, I'm talking cortisol, stress hormone, and I'm talking adrenaline, which is actually a neurotransmitter that tells the body to make cortisol. Now, cortisol is, it's what it does is it puts sugar into our muscles and our bloodstream so that we have energy to get away from trouble, which is great. That's what it should be for. The problem is, over a long period of time, that becomes very, very inflammatory. So the problems that we have when we have got this overworking in the adrenals, too much cortisol being produced, we have anxiety, we have increased stress. So the job it should be doing to get away from actually increases stress. That leads to things like fibromyalgia, ME, depression, fatigue, exhaustion, insomnia, headaches, and migraines. Those are real signs of adrenal issues.
Hands up, who's experienced all of the above? Both hands up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So then we have what's going on with our sex hormones. So in women, we have estrogen, which is an exciter hormone, gets us all juicy. It's about good mood, it's about weight stability, it's about all the juicy things. We have progesterone. Now, progesterone is a hugely misunderstood hormone, and progesterone is to calm us down. It's that delicious, floaty feeling hormone. It's essential in women, and there's a huge amount of research now that says it's more important in menopause and perimenopause than estrogen. It's more important for bone density. Like, it's a hugely important and very overlooked hormone. So the issue, oh, and we also have testosterone. So testosterone is another exciter hormone, and it's our get up and go. Now, the problem that we've got with the problem that we've got with hormones, and particularly progesterone, is progesterone means progestation hormone. It's the one that makes us, thickens our womb to make us hold a baby. But it doesn't just do that. It does so many other things. The problem is, I'm going to get a bit technical here, but I believe in you all. You can stay with me. The way that our adrenal glands are also partly responsible for making our progesterone, which is interesting. And our adrenal glands make progesterone from fat, initially from cholesterol. So this is why low fat diets were awful for women's bodies. They then make a hormone called pregnenolone, which is a precursor to progesterone. So pregnenolone should make progesterone. End of story. But do we think it's more important for the female body to hold a baby or run away from a pack of saber-toothed tigers that's running behind her? It's more important for the woman to run away from a pack of saber-toothed tigers running behind her. So guess what the body does when we've got pregnenolone, made progesterone, should be the end of the story. But when stress is applied here, the body turns our progesterone into cortisol. So now we've got added cortisol and no progesterone. The other difficulty here is that when we are on chemical contraceptives, things like the Mirena coil, combined pill, progesterone only pill, or any of the HRTs that are synthetic, the progesterone in those are not progesterone. It's a synthetic called progestin. And when you look at the chemical composition, it's exactly the same as testosterone, not progesterone. Now, what did I say about testosterone? It's an exciter hormone, gets us all ramped up. But we're not making the calming hormone. So now we've got women who are tired and wired, they're jangly, they're anxious. So that's another issue. So now we're all anxious and wired. Guess what we make more of? Stress hormone. So the current hormone problem is infertility, PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, early menopause. I mean, the youngest menopause age diagnosed in the UK was 17 last year. 17. primary ovarian failure. The other issue is we are seeing this drop off of progesterone in women, but we're also seeing a massive increase in estrogen. So that's actually the natural part of menopause. So menopause is when progesterone drops off and estrogen fluctuates, but the symptoms of the early stages of menopause, the weight gain, the sort of can't think of anything, brain fog, insomnia, is when you've got too much estrogen to progesterone. But that actually is what's also causing a lot of things like endometriosis, infertility. It's this too much estrogen to progesterone. And the difficulty with estrogen is we have got masses of xenoestrogens in our environment. So xenoestrogens come from plastic. They come from toxic chemicals that we put on our skin. They come from eating too much genetically modified soya. From other processed foods. They turn to these fake estrogens that our body sees as estrogen, and we have an estrogenic response. So we're now overloaded with estrogen. So in fact, the weight, the obesity epidemic is actually an estrogen issue. It's why we've got men growing boobs. That's why we see the women with the very, these huge kind of boobs, huge hips. So this is the issue, dropping off of progesterone and too much estrogen. So the blood sugar issue, if we cover the triangle, is that we have got hugely poor diets, because even if you are a health freak, as I am, our soils are highly, highly depleted. So we have got 25% less magnesium in our soils than we had 20 years ago. And we need magnesium massively. It does everything. So how are we not getting our nutrients, even if you're just fastidious about only eating organic food? Organic food today is less nutritious than non-organic food was in the 50s. Our soils are just so depleted. So our diets, even when they're great, are poor. If your diet is a bit sketchy, now it's really poor. And if your diet, really needs some work, okay, now we're in a situation of actual malnourishment. We're seeing people overweight but malnourished, in clinic on a regular basis. So high calorie, high carb, low fat, low nutrition. There are so many myths in the health industry. So,
yeah.
vegan is the way forward, or the paleo diet is the way forward, or we must go low carb, or, there's so many confusing elements to what we're taught. And actually that is adding to this people are just trying one thing, then another. Keto, people are trying one thing and then another, and we're not actually nourishing our body with consistency. So we're really creating blood sugar instability.
I wonder how many people who are listening right now have had an experience of, have you tried to diet? Have you followed the next big thing? Have you seen a great deal of weight loss only to put back on even more weight than you were carrying in the first place? I'd be really interested if there's some comments come up. I'm going to share them with you, Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big four hormones that we're talking about with blood sugars, because everyone knows insulin, right? Like everyone talks about insulin. I'm going to talk about the connection between insulin and stress in a moment. But we've got insulin, which is ultimately, we know it's about when our blood sugars get too high, we produce insulin, blood sugars drop. That's what we know about insulin. But insulin is also a fat storage hormone. That's its job, fat storage. So you're clearly in a place where you've got lots of excess right now because your blood sugars are high. So let's store it as fat. The other one that's its opposer is glycogen. And glycogen is actually fat burning. And fat burning is where we want to be to have a healthy metabolism, to be, in all those places. We then have two that no one really talks about, which are ghrelin and leptin. And I put them together because they work together. So one is our hunger hormone and one is our satisfaction hormone. So if people are never hungry, their leptin and ghrelin are off. Or if you can eat and eat, but you never get full, then your leptin and ghrelin are off. Now they're very, very carb sensitive. So we actually need to make sure that we're eating carbs in the right proportions to get those in balance. So here's the problem with blood sugars, is that blood sugars are hugely linked to stress. So if we take the average blood sugar roller coaster, so someone's waking up in the morning and their blood sugars are low. Now that when our blood sugars are low, we produce cortisol. It's actually to get us out of bed to go and get food, right? So we're producing cortisol early in the morning. That's standard cortisol profile. But the cortisol itself puts sugar into our bloodstream, so our blood sugars rise. And now what our body does is go, oh, quick, I've got to produce insulin. So it produces the insulin, but not enough to get us back to where our blood sugar should be, enough to get us back to where they came from. So now we're back down here. So now people might be going, okay, well, I'm hungry, so I'm going to have my bowl of granola. Right, my bowl of granola is predominantly carbohydrates. Boom, there go my blood sugars. And then my blood sugar is going to drop back down again. Okay, so I'm a bit peckish at 11 o'clock, so I'm going to have a biscuit or an apple. Boom. And then so we end up in this cortisol, which is stress hormone, causes inflammation. Insulin, which is the blood sugar hormone that causes fat storage. So we're literally going fat storage, inflammation, fat storage, inflammation, fat storage, inflammation all day. We could have the perfect diet, but if we're stressed and producing cortisol alone, that can cause diabetes. That's the thin people who end up with diabetes and go, but I'm not overweight. No, you just got high levels of cortisol in your system.
We've got a couple of comments actually from people that are definitely relating to what you're saying tonight. Rachel, who commented earlier, she said that she's been dieting from the age of about 35 to 60, and she is about 12 years past menopause now and still struggling with weight. And Amy's just mentioned, her comment is yes to that, Lorna, struggling at the moment with weight gain after weight loss. And she's 38 years old. And I know for sure because Amy and Rachel are both lovely yogis with me. And I know that Amy is a very, active, very, very fit and healthy young lady, but she's in that position where she's really struggling.
So this sounds like, firstly, 38, I'd be looking at the perimenopause sort of area. So perimenopause can start 10 years before you even start having menopause symptoms. And the initial things will be, I'm just struggling with weight gain, like what's going on? Or I'm a bit forgetful, I've lost a bit of confidence, or my sleep's a bit off. Like these are all things where it's like, what's going on with me? Am I crazy? No, it's actually the early signs of perimenopause. So in perimenopause, that estrogen fluctuation is what causes the weight gain. So it's very essential to be getting stress levels under control. It's very essential to be getting blood sugars under control. Now, what I was then going to say is that one of the other ways that we're piling cortisol into our system, other than general generic stress, is through food intolerances. So we're eating food that we're intolerant to on a regular basis, and it's causing inflammation flare up. So for example, the three biggies, wheat, milk, and sugar. I call wheat arsenic. It's not all gluten. Not all glutens are awful. It's because we hybrid the grain in 1969 and we made wheat a Franken grain. Like it is awful. It's got a very high gluten content comparative to other grains. And then in the 1980s, we started spraying it with a pesticide, which actually is an antibacterial / it's an antibiotic, i.e. it will obliterate your gut, bacteria. So it obliterates your microbiome every time you eat it. So wheat is the devil. It's arsenic. I call it arsenic. So when people say to me, please do, because I absolutely attribute the huge increase in chronic conditions, the huge increase in cancers, the huge increase in autoimmune diseases to when we hybrid that grain and started spraying it with glyphosate, like absolutely 100%. So if I call it arsenic, if people are eating organic wheat, then the only difference is it's still got high gluten content, very high gluten content. It's just not sprayed with a pesticide. So it's just organic arsenic. And then if people are saying, but I eat sourdough, okay, great, it's fermented arsenic. Swap to rye, swap to spelt, swap to, you know, other grains. There are so many now, it's become the trend. It's great. Milk, obviously, highly processed food, very inflammatory, particularly bad for women with hormone problems because it is very estrogenic. So, you know, we look to eliminate those. If you have eliminated those, the next place I look are the nightshades, potato, tomatoes, peppers, aubergine. They can be high sensitizers for people. They're very common. And here's the thing, everyone could be intolerant to a random fruit or a random bit of spice. What are you eating every day? You've got to look at what you're eating every day because the clue is in there. The next place I look is eggs and nuts. So you might be okay with some nuts and not others. Most people are okay with egg yolk, not the egg white. So, like, look at what you're eating every day and just check if any of those things are in there that you go, actually, yeah, that could be one of the things that's stopping me from, you know, from this weight issue, because it's actually just causing this blood sugar instability. But I'd like to talk to you about how we, so let me talk to you about why all of that causes an issue with digestion, for example. So the big issue with digestion, particularly irritable bowel syndrome, is that irritable bowel syndrome is actually the perfect storm of hormonal imbalance, which is why there is no pill that the doctors can fix it with. It's the perfect storm of hormonal imbalance. It's when cortisol gets built up in your bowel. It's when estrogen gets built up in your bowel. It's when the blood sugar hormone, there's one I didn't mention called CCK, which is actually about motility in the small intestine. When our blood sugars are imbalanced, CCK doesn't get released and we don't have motility, so we get constipated. If there's too much cortisol in the bowel, it ends up being painful. Cortisone, as we know it, is an anti-inflammatory. It stops the movement. That's where the pain comes from. It's all hormones. So we have to balance out those stress hormones. We have to balance out those blood sugar hormones. We have to balance out the female hormones. So I think that's giving you the models. Should we talk about how we fix them? Okay.
Yes,
so I just to recap as well, that in case anyone doesn't know, the reason why immune's a victim here is because our gut microbiome is our immune system. It's 80% of our immune system. So when we've got all these hormones getting stuck in the bowel, the bacteria, or we're eating a lot of things like wheat, which are killing off the good bacteria in our bowel, what happens is the bacteria create something called endotoxins. Those endotoxins end up getting into our bloodstream. It causes inflammation. That's where we end up with joint pain. This is where this is where autoimmune diseases are starting from, because that inflammation will go anywhere in the body. It will go into the neural pathway, it will go into the bones, it goes into the joints, stays in the gut, it goes anywhere. So that's where the immune comes into play because of the gut microbiome issue. So first of all, let's look at how we can work on the sex hormones. So, I mean, totally, I would be looking at your contraception. And I mean, I'm a massive fan of the good old-fashioned copper coil because it's non-hormonal. And there are a lot now of, some of them are really expensive. I don't have to worry about this anymore, you know, being menopausal, but there's a lot now of these kind of electronic ones that apparently are really great. But if you're...
Was there, sorry, Claire, was there an issue at some point with the coil? Because I seem to remember that the coil has got sort of negative connotation. I've never used it myself. I don't know a great deal about it, but I feel like that wasn't always the best option, or have I got that wrong?
So there's two types of coil. There's the copper coil, which is the good old-fashioned one, although it's very different now. And then there's the Mirena coil. The Mirena coil is the one that's got progestin in it. So it's a hormonal coil. You want to avoid that at all costs. They say to you, oh, it only stays locally in your womb. I'm like, how? It goes into your bloodstream. That don't make sense to me. And I know women who literally go crazy on the Mirena coil, like crazy. So the copper coil, but there are issues with it as well. You know, people can end up having very heavy periods. They do settle down, and that can also be regulated. There's arguments about whether or not we can end up with too much copper. I would always argue you can do a heavy metal detox. Like, there is no good solution with contraception. So it's about finding the best of the bad bunch, apart from a vasectomy. It's a great one. So copper coil, that's why a lot of people are going with the apps where you do temperature checks and also urinate on sticks, and it all gets input. But that's not going to work if you have period instabilities, because your periods are all over the place. So that does need to be taken into effect. But definitely looking at your hormonal contraception or your HRT. So I specialize in bioidentical HRT for women who are menopausal, because the hugely synthetic and high levels of HRT that women are on are really causing a lot of bother. One of the easiest fixes is being careful with your plastics. Obviously, BPA plastics only, making sure that you are not using the chemical nasties. And I'm pretty sure, Lorna, you talk about this very often, and I'm pretty sure some of your other guests have talked about it.
And I probably talk about it, to be fair, because of you.
I'm like a bit obsessed with the chemical nasties, because things like parabens, they're actually called endocrine disruptor chemicals. They are disrupting our hormones. That's what they do. Phthalates, which are plasticizers in hairspray and nail varnish, things like toluene, propylene glycol, these massively affect our hormone systems. Change those over. There are so many options now of relatively cheap natural products. It's easier now. Getting rid of your air fresheners, changing your cleaning products to the natural cleaning products. So important.
Oh my God, air fresheners. Let's just talk about air fresheners for a second, please. Can you please tell the world why you should not have air fresheners in your house? They terrify me. Tell us about air fresheners.
Air fresheners are just awful because
Get rid
they're
of
just
them,
pumping
people.
out. They're pumping out up to 200 chemicals a time, and it massively overwhelms your nervous system. So your nervous system's overwhelmed. Also, it starts to affect your own pheromones. Like, why do we need our house smelling like that in the first place? Like, I don't know anyway. But they will absolutely they will be piling your body full of stress chemicals, like 100%. I am better now, but I was really, really allergic to everything a while back. And I would go somewhere where they would have a Glade plug-in, and within 10 minutes I had a migraine. Like, it was so fast, and my body was like, nope, absolutely no way, I can't handle that. Shocking.
There's a few people that are agreeing. So
they're awful. So stress hormones, there's a couple of things that we can do for stress hormones. Obviously, yoga, meditation, yes. Not eating food that we're intolerant to. That's such a biggie. Another really interesting one is doing the right exercise for you at the right time of day. My business partner has a story of a few years back when she was running the wellness center, which is when we got to work with you, lovely Lorna. And she was like working a million hours a week, and she decided to take up CrossFit. And she was taking it up about 7 months ago. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And like, she's like as thin as Lorna, right? Like, she's tiny, isn't she? Like, tiny. And so she's like gorgeous and thin and, lovely. She like kept going, muffin top. She's like, everyone keeps telling me I'm just bulking out with muscle, but it's a muffin top. And she realized it's because she was piling her body with cortisol after a stressful day at 7:30 at night. She literally gave up CrossFit, and 2 weeks later her muffin top was gone. Like, all the things that she was supposed to be doing. I know when I was right in the pit of my fatigue, I would get up to go to the gym, and even them asking me to do a step up onto like the Reebok stepper thing, I just wanted to cry because I was so exhausted. Like, I should not have been at the gym. I should have been at yoga. I should have been walking in the woods. I should have been having a swim. But what I was doing was going, but I'm putting on weight. I need to lose weight. I've got to be at the gym. I've got to be beasting myself. No, there is a time and a place. I was just saying to Lorna earlier, because I'm now in remission after 16 years from chronic fatigue. And, naturally now my body is yearning for cardio. I've not done cardio for 16 years, like proper cardio. And I did a 10-mile bike ride this morning, and then I did a TRX workout, and then took my dog for a walk. And then sat down and had, something to eat and a meeting with my business partner. Like, when our bodies are like, it's easy, it's effortless, that's the time to be doing the big cardios and the big weights.
Yeah.
They're really important. You've got to find the right time for you.
I'm just looking at some of these comments again, and we've got one comment. I find my energy levels are brilliant in the mornings. I'm working out. Rachel, she looks after horses, so she's mucking out and so on. In the afternoon, she says, knackered. Evening, she feels sharp again, but she's sleeping for about 12 plus hours a day. So there's clearly peaks and troughs going on
I
there.
would be wondering if you are having a food reaction. So either something that you're intolerant to, or the way that you're eating isn't working for you. So I'm gonna come on to that in a moment.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna recap. So we've talked about stress hormones, how to reduce them. So chemicals, exercising properly, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, all of those good things, and rest. Oh my goodness. I used to go, yeah, I rest. I didn't bloody rest.
You did not, no.
I did not rest. Now I rest. Now I don't see clients until 10 in the morning because I need space to bimble. Not everyone has that luxury. So I tell my, clients who don't have that luxury, so you go home and you have an hour to yourself before you do any of the cooking in the evening. That's when your husband can look after the kids, or that's when your older kids can look after the other kids. Like, you carve out that time to drop, to rest. It's so important. Um, and we've covered hormones, and again chemicals and plastics and all those things, and contraception. So the last thing that we need to talk about how we balance is our blood sugars, and this is really, really important. There's a lot of misnomer in the alternative health world. We have three macronutrients. That's it. There's only three macronutrients on the planet. All of our food falls under the categories of being proteins, fats, or carbs. Now, proteins are the building blocks of life. We need protein. If you have a digestive issue, you will need more protein than other people because you will not break your protein down. If you have high cortisol in your body, you won't break your protein down either, because when we're stressed, we switch off our body's ability to create digestive enzymes to break our food down. So we need more to get out what we can get. Proteins are solely meat, fish, eggs, tofu, and protein powders, not whey, because as we've talked about, a lot of people find them processed. So pea, hemp, rice protein. That's it. If you're a vegan, your protein sources are tofu, pea, rice, hemp protein. If you're a vegetarian, you get eggs in there. And if you're a meat eater, you get the meat and the fish. We move over to fats. Our fat sources, cheeses, that's where cheese comes in. Nuts, that's where the proteins, yes, there's protein in it, but there's more fat. So, even if there was that movie Forks Over Knives where it was talking about how you can get the same amount of protein from peanut butter as you can from beef. Now, not everyone wants to eat red meat, that's fine, but this was for illustrative purposes. The amount of protein that you need in that peanut butter, you'd need a whole cup of peanut butter. Whole cup. Who can eat that? Like, your mouth's going to be gummed up for hours. And that was about 550, 600 calories. Plus, God knows how much fat is in that. Like, oh my God, that's so much fat. Which, if you've got hormonal issues, your liver's not going to process that. But then your body's also got to break down the fat before it can get to the protein. Whereas in the piece of beef, it was like 3.5 ounces of beef, a couple of hundred calories, and so assimilatable. So, vegan might be great for the planet, but it's not actually great for people who can't break down plant protein. It's not for everybody. I'm not anti-vegan. I'm anti-vegan being done wrong. I'm anti-vegetarian being done wrong. I'm anti-paleo being done wrong. Like, we can choose any fatty way of eating, but if we're missing out macronutrients and we're not eating them in the right way, it's not how we're supposed to eat. So what I want, the takeaway from this part I want you to get, is that every time you put food in your mouth, you have a hormone response. That hormone response is either, oh, this is a carbohydrate, so I'm going to produce insulin, or it's something else. It's a protein, fat, carbohydrate mix. So I'm going to produce the fat burning hormones, the good hormones. But then when we so also in fats, we have our avos, we have tallow, we have lard, we have our stock jellies, we have things like tara masala, we have tahini, we have all of these gorgeous fats. Let me move over to carbohydrates. We've got two types of carbohydrates. We've got non-starchy carbohydrates. That's all of our leafy greens. This is where kale comes in, people. And yes, kale also has protein, but it's minimal compared to the carbohydrate content. Kale, broccoli, cauliflowers, salads, all of those delicious, juicy, leafy greens, mushrooms, tomatoes, all of that stuff. We want to eat those abundantly. All of those phytonutrients make us really well. There are great fibers, they're important. Everything else is a starchy carbohydrate. So grains, beans, legumes, your lentils, your oats, your rye, your rice, those are starchy carbohydrates. Your root vegetables, starchy carbohydrates. Your fruit, starchy carbohydrates. And all the treats in the world, chocolate, sweeteners, alcohol, starchy carbohydrates. Now we need them. They keep our thyroid healthy. We need them. But here's the key. It's about finding the right ratio of the starchy carbohydrates to protein and fat. So you need a portion of protein, chicken breast, a couple of fats, a half an avo, bit of butter or oil, load of the other greens, and then you choose a starchy carbohydrate. Either I'm going to have some oat cakes or a bit of rye bread, or I want some fruit. We don't have a risotto that's got sweet potato and butternut squash and then have a load of fruit afterwards and don't have any protein with it. That's where people are going wrong, because our blood sugars are just spiking and then we're causing all of this fallout. So I would say I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but your lovely lady who's the postmenopause lady,
Rachel.
struggling with weight. Yeah, it's so classic. If you were struggling through menopause, then that would just say to me that, yeah, there's a balance going on with that macro split in how you're eating. And there are ways to tweak it and get it working right for you. And actually, it just maybe through menopause, your thyroid took a bit of a hit and your metabolism's not working, because the problem is we diet and diet and diet and calorie restrict for too long. Our body goes into famine mode. It goes, you're not giving me food, so I have to store onto it. So I've been here. I had orthorexia, and I wrote a story about it on Instagram the other day. Like, I put on a lot of weight when I was perimenopause, like 3 stone, and then I lost it as I was going through an awful divorce. And like, it was the only thing I could control. So I got proper body dysmorphia and orthorexia and was obsessed about everything I put in my mouth. But you know what? That famine, that literally famine that I was putting myself through and exercising, actually messed up my metabolism. So I've had to go on this process. I'm actually doing it now. Like, I'm going on a process of reverse dieting to allow my body more calories, which actually, you know what, is better for my energy. It's better for my ability to exercise. Like, we've got to learn to give our body the right amount of calories and the right macronutrients. And as far as I'm concerned, any diet that eliminates macronutrients is not healthy, because we need all of them.
Yeah. Claire, we are getting close to
Yeah.
our time limit now, but I do want to share one comment with you that just, oh, you're gonna love it. Amy has actually mentioned, she just said it's lovely to see an inspiring menopausal woman and to know that it's not something to fear. Isn't that wonderful?
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, it is. Menopause can be a really challenging journey, but what I really want to tell you is there is so much help out there, and I didn't know about it. There is so much help, and honestly, balancing your hormones in this way changes menopause, changes it.
Mm.
So you're right. We're coming up to the end. So
If
I
anybody's
want
got
to say,
questions, get them in now
yeah,
while Claire's sort of rounding up. So please, please, please feel free. And if you have got
yeah,
questions, she's still going to be paying attention to this, even on the replay. So you can always just add your
yeah.
comments and your questions. She will be around. She is, as you can probably tell from the last hour, so passionate and so dedicated to what she's talking about tonight. If you want to ask her a question, she's going to be there at the other end of it.
100%. So yeah, so you can get involved. You can find me on Facebook, Claire Snowdon-Darling. I'm there. or
We're going to
balance
put all your
hormones.
links in the description so people can catch up with you in whatever way they want to connect.
That would be amazing. What I would love to tell you about is through the wonderful COVID 2020 situation that we've had where everyone was locked down, Laura and I created something that I was telling Lorna about before we went live. And it's a symptom assessor because what people don't know is, where do I start? How do I fix this? And going to see practitioners is expensive, and we are in a place where a lot of people have come into under furlough, and we're so passionate about supporting women to get this hormones balance that we've created a free symptom assessor. If you go to iwanttofeelbetter.co.uk, iwanttofeelbetter.co.uk, it will literally talk you through the triangle of hormonal health, and it will tell you which hormone pathway you need to start on. And then you have an option to buy very, very cheaply a toolkit. But that's, if you want to go that way, then you can. And if you don't, then you don't have to. But you answer a few questions and it will tell you which hormone pathway that you need to start with. It's really clever.
We will get a link in the description and pretty much spread anywhere that we can put it. So for Rachel, who said it's absolutely fascinating, I'm so keen to look into this further. Rachel, I think we've got a way that you can do that. Charlotte still said thanks, Claire. Charlotte, it's so nice to see you. Welcome. And Amy's going to rewatch because she said that there is so much to take in, and I would highly, highly recommend that you do rewatch this, because I think there is a lot of points here that you're going to listen to it tonight. There'll be certain things that you have probably taken in to a degree, but when you rewatch it, you're going to pick up other bits as well, and it might just hit a few just a few sort of nuggets of information that you suddenly go, ah.
And I truly believe it's timings, right? Like, because sometimes we're only ready for the information when we're ready for it.
Yeah.
When we go, it's like, I don't want to hear you telling me, but I can't do my CrossFit. Like, I'm not ready for that. But maybe in a few months you go, all right, I need to talk about CrossFit. Like, it's okay. Like, this has to unfold. It's a journey. Our health is such a journey, and it always has so many gifts. And I tell you, I've really been through the ringer. And so when I say it is a gift, it really is. Let the journey unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Claire, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy tonight. I mean, tonight's talk has been, for me personally, enlightening. It's been packed with information. I'm sure you agree. There was a lot to take in tonight. This is one that you definitely want to listen or watch again a few times so that you get the most from it. And I don't know about you, but I think one of the great advantages of living in our current times, however we're going to remember 2020, one of the great things is that we suddenly have this incredible accessibility to knowledge and the great many talented and very well informed people. Now, I know there's a lot of rubbish out there. I know there's a lot of nonsense being spouted. But when you find someone who genuinely knows what they're talking about, you can feel it. And I hope you guys have felt that tonight. I mean, I honestly, like, an hour is just not long enough to do this. So I personally feel a great sense of privilege to know such people. I'm so glad that I can share this with you week in, week out. A massive, massive thank you to Claire for the time that she's put into this, for the detail that she's shared. And I am certainly going away with a lot that I want to rethink and perhaps look at in my own habits and patterns that I know have perhaps fallen into maybe some slightly less than beneficial ways over the last 6 months. So we've got an insight into the complex and the very powerful world of hormones, and hopefully a starting point, especially through the connections that you've now got with Claire. And as I say, we're going to put all of the links into the description. So if you do want to connect with her on a more personal level, I'm going to make sure that you can do that. Tonight has been just, well, do you know what? It's been so lovely. I realised that I haven't spoken to Claire in a very long time. It's been far too long, far too long. And I'm going to have to correct that. I need to be speaking to her way more, especially having listened to everything tonight. I clearly, could do with doing a little. I think my three-legged stool needs a little bit of maintenance. So we are taking a break next week. There is no Women Talking Wellness, but we are going to be back in a couple of weeks' time with a more spiritual take on the world. I'll tell you more about that in the next few weeks. In the meantime, my friends, I want you to stay curious, keep educating yourselves in the pursuit of living a glorious life. I will wish you good night. Thank you so much for your interaction. Thank you so much for sharing your comments, your insights, your thoughts, and your questions. And I'm going to see you for another Women Talking Wellness in a couple of weeks' time. Good night, guys.
Bye.